Welcome to the Coach Dave Love Podcast with NBA shooting coach Dave Love and your host, Matt Robertson. Exploring the cutting edge of evidence-based shooting development in basketball today. From shooting form to skill acquisition to shot metrics. This is the Coach Dave Love Podcast.
Welcome to the Coach Dave Love Podcast. I am your host, Matt Robertson, and with me today, as always, a very special guest, Coach Dave Love. Dave, what's going on?
Matthew, great to see you again. We'll talk about our head-to-toe Viore in a minute. I'm leaving next week for my annual trip to Australia for some clinics down there where in 3 different cities, we've got a few different schools and associations that we're doing clinics for. So excited for that. I'm putting the finishing touches on some research that we're going to be publishing on periodization of skill training in a basketball context. We're waiting for either approval of the latest shot metrics study or further revisions that need to be made, but there were very few revisions that needed to be made in the first round, apparently. So we're hoping that gets really well. So a lot of quote unquote nerd stuff going on, and I'm happy about that. What is going on with you?
It just looks like you're juggling, just keeping the balls in the air, buddy, and it's all really exciting stuff. And I can't wait to talk about all of it when the time comes. So please slow down, but hurry it up. What's going on with me? Man, out here hustling. Little walking triple double is crawling triple double is crawling. 8 months. My son's,
you have to explain that because we haven't talked in a little while. What crawling triple double? What the hell does that mean?
Okay, so this is a 3-minute thing that I'm going to try to condense. It's really funny when it's to one person on the street who gets the niche. Maybe it's less funny to 2,000 people who are in on the joke already. But my wife and I, when we had our child, we had a hard time picking a name, but we love the name Ozzy. And that's a nickname. I wouldn't really fire that on a birth certificate as a first name, probably. And all of the names attached to that are very kind of Central American in origin, which is great. But when you see an Osvaldo, you probably don't expect like a tall white dude. So anyway, we're trying to look for like a first name that kind of fit that we liked. And so I was like, it's kind of funny, again, the general population doesn't know who Oscar Robertson is. And Oscar could be long form of Ozzy. Kind of funny to me. And I got confirmation, he was like a month old. And my mom is at church being like, hey, like my little grandson, oh, what's his name? Oscar. And the guy starts dying laughing. And she's like, what are you laughing about? And he's in his late 60s. He's an old head and was like, Oscar Robertson, that's great. So the big O, so little fella's crawling triple double, which I think is funny.
When you told me his name, I think I probably gave you exactly the reaction that you wanted, which was like, oh, congratulations. Oh, wait a second. Like that not a 2-second hesitation that I just kind of gave, but more of like a 25-second hesitation, where it's like the joke needed to simmer and settle in, and the joke needed to breathe, and then I got it. And not that it's a joke, but
it's a fun little anecdote attached to that is not the point, but it's a great name, as has been proven. And then when he's like 20, outside of the triple double for a season, little note now that Russell Westbrook's kind of crossed that bridge also, like he may start to blend into the annals of history. But anyway,
if you had a second child, I'm not putting this on you, but if you were to have a second child, are you now forced to go down, like figure out some sort of Russell Westbrook genesis of the name and just, or
please,
can we pivot to just like other Milwaukee Bucks from the 1960s? Oscar Robertson was a Buck, wasn't he?
Oh, yes. We could do a Lou. There's a Lou in there somewhere that Lou Alcindor, that's a fun little adaptation.
Was Elgin Baylor also a Buck early in his career? And doesn't he have a great nickname that I'm blanking on?
I have the book of basketball behind me somewhere. The Bill Simmons vehicle. Oh no. Anyway.
All right. People are
that's 10
already
minutes.
tuning out. People don't. People, if we're lucky, they're hitting.
Fast forward 30
forward.
seconds.
Yeah.
Fast forward 30 seconds. Well,
So.
as always, thanks for being with us today. We value the time, whether you're in your car or on your run or the gym or whatever. And we have a great episode. I think it's a great episode for today. We've mentioned this a couple of times, Dave. And the title of the episode is Repetition Without Repetition, which in itself is a funny thing to me because repetition's in the title twice.
Right. Well, and like this is one of those phrases that when I heard it for the first time, I'm like, oh, that's a good little cliche. And then didn't realize that this is a widely known skill acquisition, motor learning phrase that is really like the grandfather of all these ideas. Comes out of this phrase that was coined by a guy named Nikolai Bernstein, and I was completely unaware of that. And so I just want to say to like people, and hopefully I've said this a number of times, like when you don't understand what we're talking about, cool, like awesome. I'm glad that you're invested in that, and because I didn't either, not that long ago. And just stick with it and immerse yourself in like Rob Gray stuff, which I don't understand 80% of what he's talking about still, and Harjeev Singh's tweets that I still don't understand, celebrate when I do understand them. But the more you can immerse yourself, the more you will get these ideas, and the more they'll help you as a coach or a player.
That's where I come in as the voice of the people, because if I don't ask the question, I've kind of missed the boat. So if it's something that I think is sort of above the bar for a lot of people, I'll be asking you to clarify and simplify. When you say it's a widely known kind of phrase or topic, I know that a lot of the skill acquisition stuff is fairly new to basketball, but like, where does that come from? Is that track and field, or is there like a specific just motor learning in general?
Do you already know the answer and you're leading me towards it? Okay.
I don't.
Well, so is it track and field? Is it a different sport? No, it's actually so it's Nikolai Bernstein, who apparently was a Soviet neuropsychologist who observed iron workers in the 1920s and 30s.
Sure.
And was amazed by how precise these iron workers, and I think we might have talked about this in the last episode or the one just before that, where it was amazed at how they could hammer with the hammer on whatever spike that they were using for whatever they were doing in their job. Amazed at the precision with which they could strike the hammer on the thing that they're striking. And thought, oh man, they must be able to repeat this motion with precision. And so I'm going to do a study to show how precise these people do this thing. And I believe, don't quote me on this, because I'm, as you'll discover, certainly not an expert in this topic. But I believe that because we're talking 1920s or 1930s, they didn't have the technology that we have now, duh. But he turned on a camera with a long exposure and just attached a light to one side of to the hammer. And with the long exposure was able to create a lit track of the hammer, and then overlay the exposures to what he thought he was going to see, which was going to be a very precise movement pattern that was repeated over and over and over again without variation. And what he discovered was the exact opposite. That these people who get a very precise outcome were making highly varied movements from repetition to repetition in order to get that outcome. And so the skill of the iron worker, he discovered, was not in repeating the same movement, but being able to repeat the result with a variety of different movements, and thus coined the term repetition without repetition. Did a book called The Coordination and Regulation of Movements, which he published in 1967, that has become like the Bible of motor learning. And so that, if you go to anybody sort of in the motor learning field, like I kind of want to get t-shirts made that have repetition without repetition across the chest, because ultimately that's what we should be doing as basketball coaches, especially when we talk about teaching shooting.
Whoa. Okay, so there was a lot there. I legitimately didn't know the answer, and now that you say that, I do remember you mentioning it previously, so bad job by me, but for the listener, A1.
Or great job by you.
Yeah. Great job. Fascinating just to think about as a concept. Golf is the first thing that comes to mind, as it often is with some of this stuff, where it feels like I'm making the same motion every time, and sometimes I hosel rocket into the bushes in front of me for no reason, even though I've made the same motion that I made the last 17 shots that I took previous holes. It is fascinating to think about.
Well, so let's go with golf for a second, because golf is a fantastic example of this. Like, if we play any golf, I can almost guarantee either you, likely, or somebody you know, almost guaranteed, has uttered the phrase of like, I hit it like a god on the driving range. And then I get out on the course and I don't know what happens. Well, okay, let's talk about the environment of the driving range. Level stance, ball at the level of your feet in flat ground with either a mat or decent. You've got pristine conditions on every single pristine and exactly the same conditions on every single ball that you hit. And then we get onto the course and we're not even aware of the little variations between the pristine condition where you hit it. Matt, you striped one into the middle of the fairway, and it's great grass, and so we've got no issues with the grass, and the ground appears to be perfectly flat, and oh my god, it's 75 or 25 degrees Celsius, and there's no wind, and oh, this is easy. But you don't even notice that your left foot is on a bit of a mound, and your left foot is a half inch higher than your right, and that changes everything. I one of my skill acquisition mentors is a to say he's a golf coach probably doesn't give him enough justice, but he works with professional golfers on the European tour, and he's a wonderful man to talk to, Ed Coughlin. And he told a story of one of his players decided, I'm going to get my spikes made, but I'm going to get spikes made out of Jordan 1s. It's going to be awesome. And he loved them. He got like a bunch of pairs made in different colorways, and he had his Jordan 1 golf shoes and was just hitting everything thin and couldn't figure out why. And Ed says to him, well, you just raised your feet a half inch higher than they're used to being raised. Of course you're going to hit everything thin. You're on a completely different stance because of these new shoes. And so we need to be aware of like why this occurs in the way that we practice, and then how can we change that so that we can get more adaptable results in games.
So, and this is why you pay me the big bucks, just FYI. To circle this around back to basketball, Dave, you often talk about how starting from a perfect triple threat is a problematic thing in practice, because that often doesn't exist when you get to the game. And this is the perfect analogous comparison to driving range versus course, where yes, it seems like you're practicing perfectly in this ideal, perfect, calm, stress-free environment. And then when we transition to the game, I put one, the clip from Scotty Scheffler where they said, "What happened on that shot out of the bunker on number 14 today?" And he said, "I shanked it." And the guy's like, yeah, but like, why did you shank it? Anyway, he gives a simple explanation about how well when it hits this side of the club that's attached to the hosel, it goes that way. But just when we get to the game and the pace and the intensity and the pressure ramps up, why the mechanics break down. So anyway, I'll take the next 2 minutes off here and you can just run with that.
Oh man, yeah. We have this perception that we make the same movement every single time. And one of the cool things with shot metrics is now I've got like the data on multiple Steph Curry free throws, the greatest shooter of all times. And when you overlay the path of the ball in this controlled environment that the greatest shooter of all time shoots it, they don't match up. He doesn't do exactly the same thing, even in the controlled environment. And then you magnify that by saying, okay, now do it in the game environment where 3 defenders are keyed on you and you are coming out of a dead sprint or with a complicated dribble pickup. Like, of course, there's going to be a ton of variability in there. And yet we practice in such a way to say, no, repeat the same movement every single time. And guess what? I did it too. As early as 10 years ago, I was uttering the phrase often, like, same shot every time, and not aware of the fact that Nikolai Bernstein proved in 1920 whatever that we don't actually do that. And so the ultimately variability is the skill, or no, pardon me, we need to be using variability to teach adaptability, which is the ultimate skill that we should be teaching. And I want to go into, like, I've been making this analogy about what is perfect form. And so I think we should be coming up on a commercial break. Maybe when we come back from the commercial break after the ATO, get me to talk about, we'll start with what is perfect form actually.
The big piece, just before we go to break, Dave, is as you connect the two topics, and I think about even when we talk to Dr. Panchuk, that the length of time this research has been available to us is staggering. Like when he's talking about eye movement tracking in like the early 1990s, that broke my brain. And you're talking about overlays of technique in the 20s and 30s, that anyway. Dave, let's go to a quick break and we'll come back with ATO as we always do.
Hey basketball fans, Coach Dave Love here with an exclusive offer just for you, my personalized video shot analysis. Imagine having an NBA shooting coach analyze your shooting form, just like I do for the pros. That's exactly what you'll get with my video shot analysis. Here's how it works. You send me a video of your shot and I'll break it down frame by frame. I'll pinpoint your strengths and identify the areas of improvement and give you tailored advice to take your shot to the next level. You'll receive a comprehensive analysis designed just for you. Whether you're a beginner or an aspiring pro, my feedback will help you shoot with confidence and precision. It isn't just feedback, it's a game changer. With my video shot analysis, you're not just practicing, you're evolving, and every single shot counts. Ready to transform your game? Visit CoachDaveLove.com/store to learn more and get started. That's CoachDaveLove.com/store and look for video shot analysis.
All right, welcome back. If you're a new listener to the podcast, one of the shticks that we have running is that we do an after timeout after a timeout, and we put 24 up on the thought clock, and Dave is forced, against his will, to give a concise look at what we just talked about in the last segment.
Okay, so what I want everybody to make sure that they get out of this this past segment was the fact that this research has been out for 100 years to show that even when we think we're repeating the same motion every time, there is a lot of variability in the movement, and knowing that should shape the way that we think about learning a movement. So Nikolai Bernstein coined the phrase repetition without repetition.
Dave, super clean look. For the listener it is their first time, let me tell you, it's against his will because conciseness is not Dave's default setting, and this has been an awesome display. All right, Coach Dave, let's get into what we talked about just before the break. What do you want to talk about here?
Okay, so we have this idea of perfect form. And I said this probably about a couple of months ago. I thought, oh, that's different than how I've usually phrased it. And I think this is really important. Perfect form is not necessarily, or what we think of as perfect form isn't perfect because it's um, exactly the same every single time, or biomechanically optimal. There is no such thing. Everybody's built differently. Everybody has different habits. Perfect form, what we should be looking at is adaptable form. And so you get players all the time, especially young players on social media, who, if you say, I want you to get your set point above the eyes, they'll say, well, Trae Young, when he shoots from the logo, has a lower set point. And you go, yeah, he does. And they think, well, so then you're wrong. Your set point shouldn't be above your eyes. Well, why do I want set point above the eyes? Because that's the most adaptable position. When the set point is above the eyes, it gives me the room to adapt lower when I'm shooting a longer shot. If I have my set point down around my chin, I've got very little room to adapt lower when necessary. And it's harder to adapt on the other end of the spectrum. Now, if I do make the opposite mistake and I bring the ball way back behind my head, now I have no ability to adapt in that direction. I'm at the limit. And what I think perfect form is, we've always talked about the being in the middle of the sandbox. That's playing in the safe spot in the middle of the sandbox where you can adapt in all these different ways and you're still in the safe space. And so that's how I'm starting to think of perfect form is the most adaptable form. And a skilled athlete is not actually repeating that perfect form, that middle of the sandbox, with high precision. They're actually able to adapt quite a bit. They're actually able to play jazz off of that and get towards the edge of the sandbox, knowing that they're still safe. So I hope that makes sense. Let me know as the voice of the people. Like, does that make sense? Do I need to still workshop this analogy and explain it better?
So I want you to keep talking about the sandbox just a little bit more for the people. So for example, I do think about this concept a lot in practice when I'm watching guys do their own stuff and they're trying to challenge their balance. And so they're getting it really wide to the left and having to reorganize themselves and try not to fade as much as possible. But again, in that situation, talk about what they're doing in the sandbox in that kind of situation.
Okay, so let's imagine a kid let's go back to the 1920s, since it seems to be the theme of the podcast. Like, where do kids play? They played in a sandbox. And why? Because it was effectively a safe environment that the mother or father could put the kid down in and know the only thing around them is sand. They're not going to get hurt here. And so the analogy is put them in the middle of the sandbox, because then they've got a lot of wiggle room before they get to the edge where they might fall out and they might get into danger. So when you have bad shooting form, it's not that the ball can't go in. It can still go in, and it does, but it just doesn't go in as often. And your bad shooting form will be like playing in the corner of the sandbox, where, okay, if you try to adapt in one direction, you're perfectly safe. You're moving towards the middle. But if you try to adapt in the other direction, you're falling out and now you're in trouble. And so pushing too much with your guide hand, it doesn't allow you to adapt by incorporating more guide hand. You're probably already near the limit. Having flat arc doesn't allow you to adapt by flattening it out even more. You're already at the limit. And so that's what we mean when we say, like, playing near the edges of the sandbox. You're not able to adapt in one direction. Did I answer that?
Yeah, no, that's great. So again, I understand what you're talking about because we've talked about this. I don't want to say ad nauseum because I'm still learning. However, you've given me a good picture of what that looks like for you. And for a listener who's only listened to a couple episodes, and we referenced the sandbox a couple of times, it's just nice to clarify for them what we're talking about. So let's talk about fostering adaptability.
So in order to teach adaptability, which again is probably the ultimate skill that we should be practicing as a shooter, we've got to incorporate variability. Variability forces adaptability. And because we think we're repeating the same motion every single time, we think the thing that's going to help us repeat the same motion more often is doing it in the same environment. And that actually limits our we're not teaching adaptability. We need to understand that adaptability is ultimately the skill we're chasing, and variability will help us do that. And the art of coaching is determining how much variability the player can handle while they're exploring like a new habit or a new movement pattern. And if they're very early, like if they're far removed from getting good results, they're a bad shooter. And they're exploring for the first time a new movement, then maybe we need to limit the amount of variability so that we can encourage exploration around these new ideas that they're not comfortable with. But as they get better at them, we should be expanding the amount of variability. If somebody's a good shooter who is already capable of getting good results in a variable environment, we should be increasing the amount of variability. In other words, making our practice more game representative. And so just understanding that if adaptability is what we're chasing, variability is going to be the key to do that. And there's some very simple things that we can do to talk about or incorporate to even in simple situations increase the amount of variability that we're getting from shot to shot.
So what you're talking about is adding what you call a layer to some of these athletes to find the right place where they're in the optimal learning zone, right?
Yeah. So I've got my 7 different layers that I adjust accordingly based on where the player is with their comfort and proficiency with this new movement that we're trying to teach. And those layers, if I increase them, make the drill more tax complex, more difficult, or more game representative, more game-like. And so I don't want to necessarily share all my layers, but I want people to come up with their own version. I'll share some of them. You should be changing the distance on every single shot. You're never in a game going to shoot, except for at the free throw line, and let's get into that in a little bit. But you're never going to shoot from exactly the same spot or exactly the same distance twice in a row. So the game is going to force you to adapt to a different view of the rim from a different spot at likely a different distance. So at the very least, we should be incorporating that amount of variability. Stop doing form shooting or spot shooting from exactly the same spot at exactly the same distance, and add at least the variability of move a step to your left or right, move a step in or a step back on every single shot, and force your body to learn how to, okay, how do I use this habit that's going to get me closer to the middle of the sandbox where I've got more room to explore, but figure out on this particular shot, how far do I need to shoot it? Ooh, okay, now on this particular shot, how far do I need to shoot it? That's what we should be practicing, not repeat striking the iron. I got to look up what they were hitting with the hammer. Not hitting that thing, whatever it's called.
Railway tie, maybe?
With exactly the same movement. That's not what we do. So stop practicing that way.
I had a player ask me in practice this week who's a first-year guy, and he was just like, Coach, he's a 4 who has some potential to add a little bit of off-the-dribble juice. And he's a coach, like, how do I get better at my dribble, like dribbling and attacking? I was like, that's a giant question. Do you have 45 minutes to talk about? But I said, honestly, like if you want to get better at a skill that you already have, you have to do it in a harder situation more often. Is the sort of simplest way that I could, in the moment, boil it
Yeah,
down.
great.
And he was like, well, how do I do that? And I was like, well, do it faster. Do it in a way that you add a defender at some point, whatever the layer is that you're adding or whatever the thing you're adding to it. It just has to be harder than doing it alone in a gym at 70% pace, because that's what we do everything when we're alone in a gym. And the closer you can get to a game without it being a game is ideal. And he kind of took that, and I told him we can, take that outside and work on that together. But that was just in the 2-minute conversation that we had, how I phrased it. And all of that comes from these ideas that we've been talking about for the last 30 episodes or whatever the thing is. So
really, it starts with, good job by you and good job by the player for asking a smart question, and to a coach that had a smart answer too. I think what you did a good job of is what part of this is hard for you? So don't keep repeating the things that you're already good at doing. If the hard part is when there's a defender, and I'm really coming off hard and lots of movement at quick speed, and a defender's hands are on it, and I don't know what I'm going to do next. That's when it breaks down. Then perfect. Now you've identified the challenge point, where that's how you should be practicing, like slightly below that, so that you're able to explore around the kind of things that are causing the problem that you want to solve, and then slightly harder than that, where it becomes even more game representative. But don't way oversimplify it and go back to I need to dribble, pick up, jump, stop, reverse pivot. No, you're probably good at all those skills and blending them together. It's just when the defender's hands get in there and you get bumped slightly off balance, that's when you're in trouble. So practice at that level. And then for somebody else who's a 45% free throw shooter, their challenge point is probably going to be a lot lower, where it's just, even in a controlled environment, I can't get my hand to the right to a beneficial optimal position at the set point. So we really simplify there.
Do you want to do like 30 seconds on variability and free throw shooting in practice, or is that a topic for another day?
Is this 30 seconds going to turn into 8 minutes? Probably.
Well, okay.
But honestly, I'd be happy to do that, because I think our topic is important, but we might just get into kind of repeating ourselves. So yes, let's talk about this, and let's spend more than 30 seconds. So I'm sitting in Las Vegas one evening at Summer League, and I'm going to leave out the coach's name just because I think he ends up being a little bit private. But I'm sitting with some of the guys from Slapping Glass podcast, with Chris Oliver, with a fella from the Miami Heat in their performance department, and an NBA assistant coach from an unnamed team. And fella, I say it a lot too. And so this fella, I'm talking about, sometimes I'll when I'm practicing free throws, I'll say to the player, move in a half step. Okay. Shoot that shot. Move back a half step, be a half step behind the line. And this coach asks, why would you introduce variability into the one situation that has no variability? And I said to him, because it does have variability. And my explanation at the time was all personal. It was all how the player feels. Early in the game, they're going to be fresh, and they're not going to be tired, and they're going to have more energy. But late in the game, they're going to be tired, and they'll have less energy. And so the shot will feel different. The shot will have variability just based on that. What if they're sick? What if they're slightly injured? What if this? And I listed off all these different ways in which a human being will feel different. Thus, there's variability in this, even though the line isn't moving. The fact that there's a human being and not a robot shooting it means there's variability. And so that was my justification. And then a couple of days ago, I'm saying that, I thought, hold on, I gave only the personal variability. What about elevation? If somebody shoots something from sea level, then goes and plays the next night in Denver. And we know that a baseball carries a lot more in the elevation of Denver. And I think the number is around 16% more. Well, in basketball, that's 1.5 feet. And so just going from sea level to Denver or Salt Lake elevation, the ball will go 1.5 feet different in distance at the free throw line, assuming it's shot at the same velocity, with the same angle, and from the same height.
I know you've done the math on all this. You said it to me the first time a week or two ago, and I was like, that does not seem real. And I know you've done the math on it, so I know it is real. However, it still breaks my brain to hear you say that.
Well, yeah, did we talk about this on the podcast? Did we go into this much detail, or was that the bonus content for the newsletter that we talked? I think it was the bonus content for the newsletter. So this is new on the podcast. But I did all the math on these things, and we'll go through all of it here. But I did the math on it, and then came to you and I said, if somebody shot a free throw, and I have to think about all the factors that make it extreme in one way, and then all the factors that make it extreme in the other way. So give me a second here as I work through this. At sea level, in a cold gym, because it's a hockey arena, but with high humidity, because we're in Orlando, but the ice is down for the hockey team. And what was the other factor? Oh, late in a game, when the ball has absorbed some sweat, and then we compare that. I'm assuming somebody shot same velocity, same launch angle from the same height. They shot exactly the same shot, if that were possible. But in a playoff game in Denver, where the gym is warm, it's dry. Early in the game, the ball is also dry, and at a mile-high elevation. What do you think the difference between those two shots as far as the distance they will cover is? And your answer was?
Like a couple of inches is what I said to you in the text message.
Which would have been probably around my answer as well. And the reality is 2.25 feet.
Doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem real.
Mind-boggling at 2 revolutions per second, which is about what a basket we're making a lot of assumptions to get a baseline. It's not always going to be that, but it has a chance to be that extreme. And that is the difference between somebody swishing one and accidentally banking the next one in.
Which happens. No, the through line is, so yes, we are making a lot of assumptions in this, and like you said, even though we like to think we shoot exactly the same shot every time, we don't obviously shoot exactly the same shot every time. However, the through line is that variability in this seemingly static environment needs to take place, right?
Yes. And if it needs to take place in this static environment, it needs to be ramped up significantly in the non-static environment of a game. So I'll hint at it, but what we're going to discuss in Hammer Action at the end of the episode is some actionable tasks that we want to hammer home. Just prepping in case Matt's sick one day and I have to host myself. What can we do to, what are some actionable tasks that we can do to use these ideas? And I'll start with one right now around the elevation. If I were a coach for the Denver Nuggets and we were going to go play 2 games in LA, one against the Clippers, one against the Lakers tomorrow. That day, I would shoot from a lot of our free throws from just inside the line. I would like not all of them, but I'd start to just mix in, like shoot one from the line, okay, move in a half step, then go back to the line, and just teach with a little bit skewed towards, still with variability. I'll still do some from behind the line, but I'm going to do more from inside the line, because in a few days I should go the opposite direction. Pardon me. They should go outside the line, because in a few days the ball is going to have to go further, because they'll be at sea level.
So for your average coach here, just to kind of bring it back towards the practical everyday coach, like for New Brunswick, Canada, there is not a lot of environmental change from one gym to the next. Even, we have a mountain in the province, heavy air quotes. It's a hill, but the elevation change would not be enough to substantially affect the flight of the ball. Probably, again, don't know the math. However, the way the player feels, all those internal things you talked about at that meeting at Summer League still apply. And therefore, you should probably add some variability to your free throw practice, which I've never done before. And that is a nuanced and original idea for me anyway. So yeah.
And play with it in a variety of different ways. So when we talk about increasing the task complexity, we have to understand there's 2 different ways to do that. There's nominal task difficulty and functional. So nominal is basically this is difficult in the same way for everybody. Like, how do I make something nominally more difficult? I back away from the rim. For everybody, that is more challenging. Functional is more like personal. And this is difficult for that person, and so like you can play with those 2 things. And this is getting really granular. I haven't fully wrapped my brain around how I do this. I know I do this at times, but I haven't really refined my process on nominal and functional task difficulty yet. But it's coming. The average coach, don't worry about this. Just make it different. Just like, so I will play with, going back to the free throws, play with the distance. I also play with the arc. And then like we can change the arc and say, okay, more speed, shoot a little bit faster. And the player will have to adjust the arc accordingly, but they're thinking more about the speed. I'll play the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 game all the time, where it's just like, give me a 1 arc, give me an unrealistic, like the lowest shot that you can shoot that still has a chance to go in. Give me a 3, which is what you think is optimal arc, and give me a 5, like the most realistic high arcing shot, and then 4 is in between, like 2 and 4 are in between. And I just give a player a number as they're going through their routine, and they've got to shoot the free throw at that number, and I'm giving them some variability and forcing some adaptability because of it. So you can play with distance, you can play with the speed, you can play with the launch angle. Put them on a foam block, like get their feet an inch above or 3 inches above where they normally are, and adjust the height of their release. That's going to change something. Force some adaptability even in this variable environment, or quote unquote non-variable environment.
In the short term, it seems not nonsensical, but like more work than it's worth. However, I think if you integrated all of this stuff over the course of a summer or a season or a 4-year university career, the amount of adaptability you'd be able to foster by adding variability to these little things would be, again, it's when you look at an angle that's it's slightly off at the beginning, and then 10 miles down the road, it's miles wide, the difference between one side and the other.
Well, and like you said, seems like more trouble than it's worth. And I agree. That's how most people look at it, is they go like, am I going to really get any kind of payoff? Yes. Yes, you will. Because adaptability is the skill that we should be teaching. So you're definitely going to get more in the long run out of the more variable practice if you change nothing else. And then, is it really a lot of work to say, move in 6 inches, move back 6 inches? Like, is that really? And I know you're not saying that, but that's sort of a lot of our perceptions on why we won't do things. Oh, it's too much work to be worth it. Really?
I think the work,
saying one and shooting a little bit higher or a little bit lower is too much work for you?
I think that the work, as I'm thinking about it, the work is internal, and that it would be too much work for me to not admit, but to change my coaching style in a way that doesn't feel game representative to me. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I know what you mean. Like the work, that's really now what we're getting down to is I want different results. I want better results, but I don't want to change as a coach because I'm in my habits. And I want people to understand I've gone through this many times in many different ways, and it's terrifying. And when you walk in, like I've walked into workouts with players where I'm like, I am going to try and coach completely differently. I'm going to try and break this particular habit. I'm going to try to not use a single internal cue. I am going to try to not give explicit advice, but to ask guided questions instead. It's terrifying. It is. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. And it's probably not nearly as bad in reality as you worry that it's going to be just before the reality happens. And so just pick one idea that you're learning about that makes sense to you and just start to explore around that.
I did have a coach come up to me in the wild and say that a lot of these ideas are interesting, but like there's a lot too much thinking involved and a lot of prep. And just like if you prepare properly, I think in your lead up to the practice or whatever the event, the workout or whatever, that in actual practicality, the amount of adjustment required on my part as the coach is probably minimal.
Yeah. It's just changing your habits as a coach. And I bet you will, you'll have to invest a little bit more time in preparation in the short term, so that you're making sure that you're holding yourself accountable to like, am I actually incorporating these new ideas? But as you get comfortable with it, I think your prep will go back to what it's used to being. And then your prep is going to be more focused. It's going to be actually around ideas that are going to help you. And so again, like just trying to reassure coaches, yes, it's scary, it's terrifying. It's because you're changing something about the way that you've always done it, but just give it a shot and give it a shot over a couple of weeks. And don't feel like you have to bite off everything. Just say this year, I'm just going to get out of the habit of doing spot shooting, or at least modifying how I'm doing spot shooting. Like that's my goal with the next NBA team that I work with is to realistically, it's probably going to be by the end of season 2. Can we never do spot shooting? I'm probably going to have to spend the first year convincing enough people to get some traction that spot shooting is not beneficial, and that what can we do instead, and then working to determine. But that would be my goal over a 2-year span of time.
Great cross plug is just to send those people to the podcast on the worst drill ever that's done all the time, or whatever the title of that podcast was.
The least valuable drill you can do.
That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Coach Dave, we've gone a little too far without a break here. Let's do a quick break and we'll come back and start wrapping up.
Hey there, basketball fans. I'm NBA shooting coach Dave Love, and I've got exciting news just for you. Introducing my exclusive, free basketball shooting newsletter. It's packed with insights and techniques straight from the hardwood. Have you ever wondered how NBA players improve their shots? Or how you could get to the next level, whether you're a college player, a coach, or a budding youth player? My newsletter brings all this and more directly to your inbox. Each edition is a deep dive into the world of basketball shooting. I'll share some of the tips and ideas that I use with my NBA clients, tailored for every level of the game. But wait, there's more. Subscribers receive exclusive monthly discounts on my online products. From training videos to personalized coaching sessions, you'll get it all for a fraction of the price. And the best part of all, it's absolutely free to join. So what are you waiting for? Elevate your game and join a community of passionate players and coaches from around the globe. Signing up is easy. Just visit CoachDaveLove.com.
All right, welcome back. So, Coach Dave, we had a very extended section, and oddly enough, we did follow the rough plan, although we got off on a couple of tangents to get there. So I really appreciate that. Coach, we're going to put 24 up on the thought clock, and I know we can't concisely wrap up everything we talked about, but give us a couple of important nuggets in our ATO from the section.
Okay. I want to make sure, like, your art as a coach is determining how much variability a player can handle. And so just understand that if a player is far removed from a workable solution, you have to reduce the amount of variability. And if a player is close to or at a workable solution, you should be increasing the amount of variability in their practice. And it's on you and them to kind of judge whether they're capable of handling more.
Awesome. No, I like that a lot. I think that is the important nugget from what we talked about. We got a little off track from the vertical of the topic, but kept kind of in the realm of where we wanted to be. So that, I think that's great.
Okay.
You take my word for it. Okay. Let's go to hammer action. This is the other shtick that we run here. Hammer action is our time to hammer home some important actionable intel from the episode. Coach Dave, give us a hammer action.
Okay, so at the very least, what I want you to do is get out of repeating from the same location multiple times in a row. At the very least, you should be constantly thinking, what can I change? And that the easiest things to change are just the spot on the floor and the distance of the shot. The next easiest is going to be the movement that is made leading up to the shot. And if you can just kind of play with distance, location, and movement, you're probably going to get a good amount of variability. So if you're doing spots and you realize I'm doing spots and I'm shooting 5 shots from the corner, your starting point should be, okay, 1 shot that the player's standing still. They're just in the corner, passes made to them, catch, shoot. The next shot, they have to move a step or 2 up the floor and drift the corner. The next shot, they have to start inside the line and backpedal out. The next shot, they have to start inside the line, facing the sideline, sprint out and turn. And just by doing add that kind of repetition without repetition, that's kind of where we're searching for. And then that would be the baseline. I would be doing that kind of practice with a weak shooter. If they're a better shooter, then we probably need to be adding more variability. And then if you say, well, how do I add more variability to that situation? It might be stop doing that situation, stop doing spots, and instead create a situation where it's more game representative, and not so drill based or challenge based. It's a game situational based drill.
I often think about the phrase, the guy who can get it off in a phone booth, who can get a shot off in a tight window. And how did he get there? Or he or she get there? It probably wasn't, doing everything on air and just shooting a million shots on air. There was probably defenders involved in his development that made it difficult for him to get his shot off the way it was, and he adapted accordingly.
Yep.
adding a layer or 5 for this very good shooter is as important for their continued development as adding movement variability for this very weak shooter. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. And we probably overestimate how much we need to simplify things for weak shooters. We go back to, it has to be stationary and it has to be from the same spot over and over and over again. No, it doesn't. And no, I would argue for the same spot. No, it shouldn't. Even the movement, I add movement almost right away to my form shooting because we're going to have to add it eventually. And it's not that much challenging to hop and then do a form shot than it is to just do a stationary form shooting drill. But we're getting so much more potential variability, but actual game representativeness into that practice, which makes it more beneficial.
I'm worried that the average coach heard add movement and forgot the part where your player is on balance when they're shooting it as part of their movement, right?
Yeah, so I'm still guiding towards it. Like I'm still coaching. It's not I'm getting you off balance, shoot an off balance shot. That may happen on the first rep, and then I go to them and say, like, what do you feel? Hopefully they say I was off balance. Good. Do you know how to solve that problem? Yes. Good. Show me. Or, hey, what did you feel? I don't know. Well, I saw that you were off balance. Shoot another one and see if you can feel that too. And maybe they shoot an off balance one. They go, okay, yeah, I felt it. Good. Do you know how to solve that? Yes. All right, show me. Maybe they say, or maybe they go on balance and say, oh, that was better. Did you feel how stable? Any idea what you might have changed in order to be more stable on that one? Yeah, I think I got my feet wider. Oh, good. All right. Let's explore that. Show me what too wide would look like now. What does that feel like? Like all these, I know what I'm trying to get them to discover. I'm just guiding them towards figuring it out with the being open-minded enough to say, like, maybe their solution or maybe their solution in this particular environment isn't what I think is textbook perfect. But anyways, now I'm rambling on sort of a different topic, but
I'll listen to the rambles all day, buddy, because there's useful pearls in there, even though you consider them ramblings. Coach Dave, as always, you are a delight. Appreciate the time. Where can the people find you if they want to reach out and get in touch?
Sign up for my newsletter on coachdavelove.com and enjoy the free information that I'll be sending you there. And then find me on social media at Coach Dave Love. And yeah, where do people find you?
You can also track him down in Australia over the next couple of weeks, which you should do because it totally is worth your time. I promise. People can find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter at Coach Matty Rob. Please rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. It all really helps. We appreciate your time and thanks for coming out. See you next week.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Coach Dave Love Podcast. To stay up to date with our future episodes, please remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to sign up for Coach Love's free shooting newsletter on CoachDaveLove.com and be sure to follow him on social media. You can find him at Coach Dave Love.